Today is a special holiday edition of Plant Storytime where we're going to talk about the Easter lily. And my hope is that you use this video where if this was an intense week, you can kind of take a minute to relax and learn about the history of a plant, which is as low-key as it gets. Or if you have stuff to do in the garden that you have been putting off because it is tedious, hopefully this is a nice distraction for your brain as you do that thing. This is not going to be a religious video. We are just going to talk about Christian mythology very briefly to explain why this plant is used in church services at this time of year. So lilies are mentioned in the Bible several times in Christian mythology. And oftentimes lilies are associated with purity or with rebirth. The reason that a lily is used in the Easter tradition is because, allegedly, Jesus, when he was praying the night before his crucifixion or his execution, he sweat, and his droplets of sweat, where they fell, Easter lilies grew. And so then it's used as a symbol during these religious ceremonies. When we think about how the Easter lily came to be in the United States and how we use it here, it actually tracks back to Civil War. So there was a gentleman who served in the Civil War who ended up marrying the niece of Rutherford B. Hayes, the US president. His name was Russell Hastings, and he rose to the level of general during the Civil War. He was horribly injured during the war, and so after serving, he moved to Bermuda. And in Bermuda, he was like, okay, I'm going to try my recovery here. He stayed there for several years, and in a full 180 from service in the military, he was like, I'm going to be a flower farmer. We're just going to give that a try, right? And so he established a relationship with a florist in New York and would grow Easter lilies, send them to this florist, and would sell it over the holidays. By the time we got into the 1920s, Bermuda's economy was really heavily reliant on Easter lilies. They didn't have quite the economy surrounding resorts or hotels at that point. And so the Easter lilies were starting to really suffer from some unknown process or disease. And so their shipments and their exports had really, really suffered and had gotten down to only a few hundred crates of Easter lilies per year. So Bermuda got their very first government-appointed botanist. And this was a gentleman, Lawrence Ogilvie from Scotland. He moved to Bermuda and started working as their government botanist as basically his first job out of university. He was in his early 20s, which is a little bit crazy to think about, getting out of, like, I don't even know if he had gone to graduate school at that point. I'm not sure about that, but he was like mid-20s when he started his job. Uh, and he showed up in Bermuda and started to investigate what was going on with these Easter lilies. And at the time, it was theorized that the damage that they were seeing was from aphids. If you don't know what aphids are, they're these tiny little bugs. They tend to occur in large populations of aphids, and they all kind of suck out the sap or nectar from plants. So if a plant is really overrun by aphids, they end up looking pretty sickly and poor. Uh, and Lawrence Ogilvie discovered that it was aphid related, but it wasn't the aphids themselves. What he ended up finding was there was a virus that was being transmitted or spread by the aphids. And so he figured out how to identify whether a plant was infected with the virus. They would quarantine or cull those crops. And in the course of less than 10 years, he was able to like septuple or octuple the amount of lily exports that the country was able to have, and really save that large portion of their economy. So that was happening in the 20s. Lawrence Ogilvie actually then ended up playing a pivotal role in World War II. He had returned to England, and before the war, England really relied on imports of most of their food. It's tough being an island nation, right? And so he started working on making sure that they would be less reliant on imports, and specifically making sure that they were tracking diseases in crops, increasing yields, and saved a lot of people from starvation during World War II. Now, during World War II, one of the places that we used to get Easter lilies was Japan. And as you may recall, we did not have the best relationship with Japan during World War II. So the US was like, we can't import Easter lilies from that location anymore. So then a farmer decided that he was going to start growing Easter lilies in Northern California. And through the course of World War II, that area of growth increased exponentially. Tracking into today, 95% of the world's potted Easter lilies now come from a very specific location around Northern California. So that crop continued to develop there, and it's essentially now a monopoly for the world's potted Easter lilies. Easter lilies are a really useful crop to use over a holiday because they can be grown in greenhouse conditions where they can basically track when they think a plant is going to bloom and adjust the conditions in the greenhouse accordingly so that they time it for a holiday. So there you go. That's the fun history of the Easter lily, and I hope you have an amazing day. I appreciate you joining me. If you enjoyed this and you like random garden and nature story time, you can like and subscribe.